So us as humans, we have a view of what creativity is. And it's often like, we know that nothing, like, can we create something out of nothing? Most likely not, because we, like, a creative act is combining different things. It's connecting dots. It's taking something that exists and turning it into something else. And so our view of creativity is that it builds upon what already exists, and then we do something new with it, or somewhat new. Now, here's the hard part.
Oh, no.
ChatGPT or GPT-4 now already, like, this is still early. Like, we have to understand this is early. Already is displaying behavior that looks and quacks and walks like human creativity. Even though under the hood, we know that it's not creative. We know that it's not sentient. We know that it doesn't think, it doesn't reason, it doesn't do the things we think of as what humans do in a human way. But the output is the output. And if the output of a text or an image or a video, we look at it, and if we know that a human made it, we go, oh, that's really creative. Like, it's fresh, it's new, it's different, it's a new spin on an old thing. It's like it's creative. We can't tell anymore, and we're quickly getting to the point where nothing that is made, we are not able to distinguish between whether a human made it or an AI made it, because it looks creative. And if it looks creative, and if it looks like it's new, who cares if, technically speaking, is not creative? It looks like it, so why does it matter? So here's then where we'll come full circle. We're going to start having to ask ourselves, and some people have already, but we're going to have to start asking ourselves, what even is creativity truly? What even is sentience? What even is consciousness? Like, what even is it? Because if this thing acts like it without having what we think of typically as something that humans only possess, then what do we do with it? And some will say that, oh, this, when it creates things, is all a mirage. Like, the behavior is a mirage because it's just pretending or imitating. Yeah, but humans pretend and imitate all the time. Like, how do kids learn? They look and they imitate.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to start asking ourselves some pretty tough questions, because a lot of people won't like the answers.
And I think it's great. This is one part of your philosophy on this that I actually think is so fascinating, is that AI is going to force us into a corner where we're going to have to realize what we are. Like, we can bullshit ourselves and say, I'm a guy who fills out Excel sheets. But it's like, listen, bro, like, there's going to come to a point where these machines are going to come in and just take that from everybody. And then there'll be artists who see themselves as magical treasures. And it's like, well, wait a second. Yeah. When the machine comes in and can do certain parts of your job, certain parts of your treasured creative work better than you have to sort of say, well, what makes you, and you always keep on referring back to this idea of higher order skills, decision-making skills. You know what this reminds me of an awful lot is I used to study meta learning and cognitive the ability to make better decisions and whatnot. And it constantly comes back to this, is the idea of like drifting towards the higher faculties within man, and realizing that an artist is not necessarily somebody who can draw well. Of course, that's a big part of it. And it gives it a certain personality and style sometimes that you can't get otherwise. But an artist also has to know what to draw, what questions to ask, to contextualize things, what to edit, when to decide what is good and what is bad, what to clean up. Like, that's what's quite interesting. And again, with creativity, my experience, I'm a very creative person, is that it's actually very much like the generative AI. If I want to create something, I'll get like 50 ideas that will flood into my mind. And 48 of them will all die, and then the last 2 will become manifest in the world, and I'll edit them and produce them. And it's actually very similar to how this AI thing shows up. It just pukes all these generations, and I kind of cut them down. So I think this is
go ahead.
I was just going to say it's really, really brilliant, and I like your unique philosophy on this. Like, it's so kind of ahead of the curve, because an awful lot of people are just reacting to this, but you're sort of like, bro, I've been in the fucking dungeon for 3 years, and I've been staring at this thing in the face, watching what it's doing. And I was like, I smoked the cigarettes until I burned my fingers, and I've said to myself, you know what, this is what I am in relation to
I dove to the bottom of the swamp, and I've been fighting Grendel for the past like 3-4 years, and attached to all that conversation about creativity, like, we're going to ask ourselves, what is originality? Like, has anything ever in the history of mankind ever been truly original, or do we have a skewed version of what originality is? And like, this is where I often lose people because of what I'm saying next, because it's not something that people usually think of or think about or conceptualize to themselves. But the reality is this: when AI can do anything, and here's the funny thing, it can do all the creative tasks, and it's coming for the creative knowledge workforce before it comes for the truck drivers. And so when that is true, what is your role in all of it? And the long and short of it is, knowing what I know and the people I speak to and seeing what's coming, like what's already here and what's coming, we're getting to the point in the next couple of years, maybe even sooner, where your job will be that's most like a creative director. Like, you call the shots. You're a producer more than you are a laborer or worker. And like, we all know, it's like and I'm sure you know, especially in what you do. But when a movie is made, the director and so on films the shots and the scenes, and they take multiple shots of a scene, and they collect and they try things and they experiment and they try lines different ways. It's a very generative process because a lot of material is created. Because in their mind, they have a vision that might be blurry, but it's clear enough where they know what to shoot and what to experiment with. And then they end up in the editing room, and it's in the editing room where truly the magic happens. And that's where a scene that was filmed one way can flip and be turned into something else in the editing room. But that's where they are. And so they spend post-production, they spend a ton of time cutting, editing, rearranging, changing the narrative, the timeline, the Chronos timeline, the Kairos timeline. They move it all around until they end up with a finished movie that reflects their vision and their aesthetics and what they were trying to do with it. A lot of people have not spent enough time understanding the editing process in any creative work. And they haven't understood the value of judgment, like making the call, like seeing you have 10 scenes in front of you of a movie. How does the director make the call? Judgment. He or she spots something that they know this will fit. Sense of taste, knowing not just like, oh, I like pretty colors and, fluffy, this, that, the other thing, and hearts and emojis. We're talking about you having a specific aesthetic where it's not just the visuals, but it's the overall messaging and it's the overall tone of what you're saying. And so judgment, sense of taste. And for that to make sense, you got to have a enough perspective where you can look at the same situations from multiple points of view, but still land on the primary perspective that you have and that will best communicate reality to the people who view the thing. And all of that requires you to have discernment. And when people hear about discernment, it's like an odd sounding word. It sounds religious and it has a lot of those connotations. And people now think, oh, we need discernment so we can tell what's real and what's false online. That's not what discernment is, because you won't be able to tell what's real and what's fake online. It's hard enough now. It's only going to get worse. Like we're getting quickly to the point where anything you see online, you cannot anymore tell the difference between what's made by AI or what's recorded by a human. Like in this video, like you're all assuming that Steph and I are real, but you don't know. And if this was made by AI, you wouldn't be able to tell. So discernment is not about what's false and what's real and what's fraud or whatever. It is more so about the ability to spot patterns. And humans are both pattern seeking animals, but we're also pattern creating animals. We will create a pattern where there in reality is none, right? So all those things together, and like, when I say this to CEOs and VPs of marketing and their teams, they're all like, okay, but they don't quite get it.
Yeah.
But here's the key difference. When I've spent a few weeks training them and they see what's possible, now they get it, because they go, what I thought was my work, writing things, content, or producing marketing assets and so on, what I thought was my work is not my work. I have to go a step above it and think of myself as a creative director, as a editor of sorts, And they realize that the skill they need to practice and hone and like sharpen are the last things that AI will do. And maybe AI never will, but it's also possible that AI will at some point, because it'll be able to make those calls, but it'll do so in right-hand man kind of way where he does a lot of the brunt work. But they realize that we need to have a consistent perspective in our marketing materials. We need to have a consistent taste. And so companies are realizing we need to become taste makers in our market. We need to set the pace, set the taste, give people the perspective we want them to have. And so it becomes a bigger picture view of the work you do. And people are getting to the point now where they realize that's the name of the game. It's not, I thought it was do research, write a blog post, publish the blog post, or write a sales page, do research, write a sales page, do the sales. We all thought that was what we did, but it turns out that our work truly happens at a different level. And the sales page being made is just a manifestation of that deeper work that we're doing as humans. Does that make any sense?